Good evening. My name is Philip Stevens, and I'm a board-certified clinical chaplain through the College of Pastoral Supervision and Psychotherapy. Tonight in this video, I want to provide you with some information about emotional intelligence and how it impacts our pastoral care as chaplains. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, to recognize, and to express one's emotions. It includes the ability to understand how our emotions influence our actions, how our emotions influence our behaviors. It's not only the capacity to recognize and understand how our own emotions impact those things, but it's also the capacity to recognize and understand how the emotions of others influence their actions and their behaviors as well. Emotional intelligence is an important part of chaplaincy because it helps a chaplain to build rapport and connect with the people we serve. Emotional intelligence is important for everyone because it helps us connect with our feelings, it helps us to act on our intentions, and it helps us to make informed decisions regarding personal goals. In 1995, Daniel Goleman, an American psychologist, published the national best-selling book, Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. His book was designed to help introduce this topic to the general public. According to Goleman, there are 5 components or 5 elements of emotional intelligence. The first is self-awareness. People with high emotional intelligence are usually very self-aware. They recognize and they understand their emotions. And because of this, they don't let their feelings rule over them. They take an honest look at themselves. They know what their strengths are. They're honest about what their weaknesses are. And they work on both of these areas so that they can perform better. Many people believe self-awareness is the most important part of emotional intelligence. The second component is self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to appropriately express our emotions and our impulses. People who self-regulate typically do not allow themselves to become too angry or jealous. They don't allow themselves to make impulsive, careless decisions. They respond rather than react. They exhibit the quality of mindfulness. That is to say, they are mindful of how their action might impact the conversation or how their action might impact someone else. The third component is motivation. People with a high degree of emotional intelligence are highly motivated. They're willing to defer immediate results and immediate gratification for long-term success. They're willing to work hard to achieve their goals. Generally speaking, they are highly productive. They love a challenge, and they are very effective in whatever they do. The fourth component is empathy. And even though it's listed fourth, this may be the most or second most important element of emotional intelligence, because empathy is the ability to identify and understand the emotions, the wants, the needs, and the viewpoints of those who are around you. People with empathy are good at recognizing the feelings of others, even when those feelings may not be so obvious. As a result, empathetic people are usually excellent at managing relationships. They are excellent at listening, and they are excellent at relating to others. They avoid stereotyping and judging too quickly, and they live their lives in a very open and honest way. Another component, the one listed fifth, is social skills. People with high levels of emotional intelligence usually demonstrate very good social skills. They are easy to talk to. They are considered as being very likable by others. And those with strong social skills are really good team players. They get along with everyone on the team. They know how to help everyone work in a cohesive, collaborative way. They're interested in helping others learn. They're also interested in helping others develop. They're good communicators. They're able to manage disputes, and they are able to build and maintain relationships. As I look at these 5 components, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, I can see why emotional intelligence is so important to good pastoral care. It is good for us to be self-aware of the thoughts and the personal experiences that arise within us as we minister to others. You may be counseling someone, ministering to someone, and perhaps they remind you of a very good friend. Maybe they don't remind you of a good friend at all, but they remind you of someone who is very mean to you, someone that you do not care for. How we are viewing other people, the experiences that that interaction brings up within us can oftentimes impact the interaction that we are having with that individual. You might be ministering to somebody who shares a lot of the same interests as you. And for that reason, you find yourself very drawn to them, and you find yourself sharing personal stories with them rather than engaging in a spiritual assessment. Rather than listening, you find yourself talking. Maybe there's somebody who reminds you of a family member with whom you are distant, a family member from whom you've separated yourself. And for that reason, it can cause some disconnect in that interaction you may have with that individual that you're serving now. The emotions that arise within us really can impact our body language. They really do impact the words we use. They have an impact on our interaction with others. So it's helpful for us to be aware of the emotions that are evoked as we are speaking with others, as we are counseling and ministering to others. Awareness is important because when we are aware of those emotions, when we are aware of the physical manifestation of those emotions that we are feeling, we are then able to self-regulate. And by being sensitive to and aware of those thoughts, those feelings, and the filters that are inside of us, by being aware of those things, we can more appropriately manage those emotions. We can more appropriately manage those thoughts and feelings that are arising within us. For me, in my faith tradition, I think of what the Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, where he counsels followers of Christ to take every thought captive to Christ. So that means that we are aware of our emotions, we're aware of our feelings, and we make an assessment of them before we allow them to impact us and cause us to react to someone based on our feelings rather than responding based on our pastoral care and training. And taking our thoughts captive, being aware of them, and knowing how to then move forward from there, that takes practice. It takes some introspection, and it takes honesty about ourselves. It takes honesty about being willing to truly consider how are others experiencing us as we experience them. And for me, that's the motivation component. I feel a very strong calling to chaplaincy. Pastoral care and spiritual support are very much needed in our world. Pastoral care and spiritual support are so important that I don't want any of my emotions, whether they be happy or sad, to keep me from being present with the people I serve and to keep me from being able to give them my undivided attention. So that's the motivation. And I would tell you that it takes some work. For some of us, perhaps it takes more work than others. But the work is always worth it because it allows us as chaplains to display and demonstrate, well, wait a minute, not just display and demonstrate, but it allows us to experience empathy with others. As we understand our emotions better, as we do a better job of expressing our own emotions, we then become better able to recognize and understand the emotions of others. Empathy for others helps me do better when I seek to relate to others in a conversation. Having empathy for others leads to better social functioning. Having empathy for others leads to more healthier social interactions. And by displaying empathy, I become not only a better chaplain, but a better pastor, a better husband, a better father, grandfather, friend, and student. So let me just sum up this slide by saying that from a pastoral care perspective, emotional intelligence helps us as caregivers to be more helpful to the people we serve. It helps us to stay present in regard to what they are feeling rather than getting lost in what we are feeling. Now, there are some strategies that we can discuss for improving our emotional intelligence. There are steps that we can take to become better in this particular area. And here are 4 strategies that resonate with me. And the first one is to be introspective, to engage in a self-evaluation, to identify your weaknesses, and to get an honest picture of yourself. Reflect on and observe how you react to others. What is there about those interactions that you would like to improve? What is a growing edge for you? Really ask yourself, and maybe the second thing I would say is to get some feedback from others. Ask for and be prepared to receive and act on criticism. Ask for feedback from others. You know, my daddy said one time, if one person calls you a horse, it's no big deal. But if 2 or 3 people call you a horse, you ought to consider buying a saddle. So ask yourself and ask others, how do they experience you? And as you receive feedback, consider honestly what they say. You may initially think that they are way off base. You may think that they misunderstand you, and maybe they do. Maybe others are misunderstanding you. And for that reason, you may need to change the approach that you have with others. You might need to change the way that you interact with others so that you can be more helpful as a chaplain. Another strategy is to have an inclusive attitude. I think of this as seeking to put ourselves in someone else's shoe. I always think of the golden rule that we are called to love our neighbor as ourselves. And as for myself, I appreciate being heard. I appreciate someone considering my perspective and not just making some snap judgment or applying some label to me. I appreciate it when people seek to understand where I'm coming from and understand what I'm going through. That, I believe, is really what the ministry of presence is all about. And the ministry of presence and the gift of connecting with others is what I seek to offer as a chaplain so that I can help support them and sustain them. Now, this 4th strategy is to practice recognizing and naming your emotions. It's good to be able to recognize and name our emotions. Unlabeled emotions oftentimes go misunderstood. And when emotions are misunderstood, it can lead to irrational choices and counterproductive actions. It can lead us to do things that are not helpful. Recognizing and naming our emotions gives us the chance to take a step back and to make choices about what do we do with those emotions. It's something that allows us to respond rather than react. And we cannot intentionally choose how to respond to the things we're unaware of. It's the same way with the emotions. It's difficult to appropriately express and manage our feelings if we're not aware of them. I know that some individuals have a hard time really expressing how they are feeling. A tool that I have found helpful in this area for both chaplains and for the people that we serve as chaplains is called an emotions wheel. I found all these strategies to be helpful. And I know that as an individual that it's important to me to continue to be introspective, to always reflect on how others may perceive me. And I need feedback from everyone as I minister to them. But what I want to say about these strategies next really is that I would urge you to consider looking at and exploring naming your emotions through the use of an emotion wheel. I've got one here that I found online from the Junto Institute. And it's a pretty good emotion wheel. It's very much like all the others that you can find online. It's a tool that can be very helpful in helping us to describe our emotions. And so while someone might describe themselves as feeling bad, it can be more useful to find a more descriptive term, such as irritable or frustrated or anxious. The more specific your word choice, the better insight you have into exactly how you're feeling, what caused it, and now what you should do about it. There are, as I said, various emotion wheels you can find online. As I looked at some of them the other day, I noticed that they included words that are not specifically emotions. Some of them had some words or emotions like abandoned or ignored and rejected. Those types of words, those types of emotions are sometimes referred to as imposter feelings, which is to say that they seem to describe an emotional state, but in fact, they amount really to being more judgments about someone else's behavior. For example, you abandoned me, you ignored me, you rejected me. So those words abandoned, ignored, rejected, they describe the behavior of another individual. Similar words might be pressured, betrayed, neglected, put down, used, intimidated, unwanted, and so on. There are a lot of words that we sometimes use and say how we feel, and those words are actually describing the behavior of someone else. When we hear those words, when we experience those behaviors from others, it can be helpful to further explore those words, those feelings, and see what is driving them. And for me, that's where a tool like the emotion wheel can help us. The experience of someone who has abandoned us may lead us to feel shocked. It may lead us to feel confused or dismayed. It may lead us to having feelings of isolation. It may lead us to having feelings of anger. So I would invite you to take a snapshot of this or look up an emotion wheel online, do something along those lines this week, and begin to notice some of the different emotions listed on the wheel. Check and see if there are some that stand out as describing an emotion that you are currently feeling. See if there are some that stand out as describing an emotion that you felt sometime in the last week. And then ask yourself, are there some emotions which you believe would help you to describe the feelings of someone you are ministering to? Even if they haven't labeled an emotion to how they're feeling or what they are experiencing, how would you then describe that emotion of that person you're serving? Emotional intelligence helps us to better understand and appropriately express our emotions. A better understanding of our emotions can help us to be aware as we interact and serve others. It can help us to be more helpful in validating others, listening to them, and empathizing with them. And for me, I find that it is just a really good way to help me to be aware of those emotions that arise within me when I'm in the midst of a difficult conversation, or perhaps when some situation that someone else is in evokes a memory from my past. How can I stay present with that person and still acknowledge and later reflect on those emotions that are coming and arising within me? Emotional intelligence is a very important thing. I think it's an area that we don't study or talk about enough. And I wish you the best of luck as you continue to consider such things and as you continue to consider how can you better serve others. Thank you, and I hope that you have a great and blessed day.